Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So today I am going to be reviewing the latest release from Brom, and that is Evil in Me. This was released by Torn Nightfire. I believe this came out in either late September or early October. It's only been out for a little bit. Brom is an author who's been around for quite a while, but he's probably better known as an artist. He does all of the cover designs as well as all of the interior art. All of Brom's books are just absolutely gorgeous, and they always have a center fold of images that he's painted, and all of the chapters begin with mini illustrations from him as well. So I always like picking up the hardcovers of Brom's books because I just find them absolutely gorgeous. This is now the third novel that I have read from Brom. I have previously read Krampus and Slewfoot. I feel like at this point Slewfoot is probably his most well-known book. I didn't love that novel, and that's actually one of my most watched book reviews ever on my channel. I get a lot of hate for not liking that book, and I apologize that everybody gets mad at me for it, but I didn't love that book. I definitely liked Krampus a little bit more. And we're gonna dive into some similar thoughts on Evil in Me. So I have to say, I am just a random person on the internet. These are just my opinions. It's not the end of the world if I don't like these books and you do. That's awesome if these books work for you, but I have had some kind of hit or miss moments with Brom in the past. I will say this is probably more of a hit than a miss. This is, I'm gonna say right off the bat, this is a 4-star read. It's a 4-star read. I did not hate it by any means. I have a lot of issues with it, but out of the issues that I have with Brom, this one probably has the least. So let's buckle up. There will not be spoilers at the end of this video, just because I don't think I need to do spoilers to talk about this book. It's a very straightforward book. I really don't think there's that many twists and turns. So I'm going to read the inside flap here. Aspiring musician Ruby Tucker has had enough of her small rural town and dysfunctional family. But a falling out with her best friend and bandmate has killed her dreams of escaping and making it big in the 80s Atlanta punk scene. When Ruby helps her eccentric neighbor organize his religious relics, an ancient ring clamps down on her finger, possessing her with the spirit of a bloodthirsty demon. There's no exorcising it unless hundreds of people chant a spell to set Ruby free. And what's worse, the ring is a beacon for evil, drawing a monstrous mob straight to Ruby, hungry for her flesh. If Ruby can get her band back together, she has a shot at salvation. It's time for her to face the music and put her whole soul into a song, one powerful enough to raise some hell. This devilish tale includes nearly 24 of Brom's immersive paintings and brilliant end papers, which it really, really does. This book is so beautiful. Okay, so let's chat about this. One of the things that I really appreciated about this book was the beginning, prologue chapter section. A lot of this book is going to focus on, obviously, demons and possession, but there's a lot of Jewish folklore in it as well. Nestlings by Nat Cassidy is another novel that I've read recently that really had a really amazing amount of Jewish folklore in it. However, I have to say I'm kind of hesitant with how Brom handled this folklore because I looked up some of the figures and some were definitely real and some were not. And the reason I say I'm hesitant is because Krampus kind of rewrote Austrian and Germanic folklore and made it like very Norse influenced, which I found very strange. Like Krampus was almost like a Loki derivative, which is just not at all what the stories say. So I'm not 100% sure how true to old school Jewish folklore some of the mythology in this book was, but I did think it was very cool that it was there, and I really did like the opening sequence. I thought it was scary. I thought it was well done. I love how it connected back to the rest of the story. Really, really appreciated that. And then we get to Ruby, who to me is just the cliche main character of every Brom story. The main character in Krampus felt just like Ruby. The main character in Slewfoot felt just like Ruby. Even though one was, deadbeat dad down on his luck, and the other was, like, a puritanical woman, and Ruby is here, like, a 20-something 1980s wannabe punk star bass player. They all seem to be these kind of down-on-their-luck outcast characters who have really dysfunctional families, have a group of, like, friends to enemies that make their life a living hell, and then have some weird power thrust upon them, or some weird situational good versus evil moment with some kind of supernatural being that sets them on this path, and then they have to overcome some other type of negative evil in their lives. And then we get to like this big showdown, and then there's kind of a brief ending. That to me is pretty much how every Brom story reads. I find them very, very formulaic. I find all of the characters pretty much interchangeable, and it's just little minor tweaks and turns to the plots that create a different setting or story. So that's one of my biggest issues with Brom, is Ruby just felt like every character I've read in, every lead character that I've read from Brom in previous stories. I've not read Lost Gods or The Child Thief, so I don't know if that is a continuing thing, but I did find myself kind of rolling my eyes once again at the down on her luck misfit who has power thrust upon them in the strangest of ways and then has to deal with the consequences. I just feel like I've read that so many times. There's always the scene where, like, once power is first thrust upon them, they also then get to go and, like, wreak havoc and get mini revenge on, like, the small town bullies or whatnot. Like, every novel has that. And so that kind of bothered me with this, just because it just felt so redundant overall. Ruby, I think, was a fine character. She really didn't have too much personality, in my opinion. And things just kind of worked out for her in weird ways. She seemingly burned bridges with people and then was able to connect right back with them, kind of like with Tina. Her relationships with, like, Billy and Stacy were very, very odd. I was mostly intrigued by her relationship with the woman who oversaw the YMCA, who's kind of like her probation officer's eyes and ears, I guess I would say. That to me felt like this weird love-hate relationship that I wish had been expanded upon more. That whole first half of character development really goes absolutely nowhere and is completely lost once Ruby leaves Alabama to go to Atlanta, which I found very, very interesting. Her relationship with Josh and Pam, I definitely wanted more from, because that seemed to be the only healthy relationships that she had at the beginning of the book, and they just kind of also fade as the story goes on. And then we have to get into the actual, like, meat of the problem here. So this story is about an evil ring. There's, again, a lot of really cool Jewish folklore, a lot of really cool demons, and a really interesting way to connect the entire story to, like, 80s doom metal and punk, and, like, the heavy, thriving punk scene in Atlanta in, like, the mid-80s, and I thought that was a really interesting way to do it. I loved the concept of these demons who are so closely intertwined with song. I really did love the backstory of Lord Shilbeth. I loved how it was very up in the air on whether or not this character was evil. I loved the concept of questioning the intentions of God. I thought it was very, very well done on that kind of back-end folklore aspect of the story, but then I just think it was these amazing ideas that didn't really translate too well into how they fit with the overall narrative. And I think my reasoning for that is because I think Brom had too many villains in this story. We have 3 sort of 5 major villains in the story. We have Lord Shilbeth, which is obviously our main demon. We have Eduardo, who is who is Ruby's mother's long-term boyfriend. We have Richard, who is this, like, random serial killer prowling the South at the time that the story takes place. I guess we have Beale, who is the demon who possesses Ruby, and then we have Voodoo, who is a demon who is sent to pursue Ruby. So we have a lot of different characters to play with, all kind of acting as a catalyst for this evil in Ruby. And 3 of them are kind of debatably villains that then may or may not be good. We don't really even know what happens with Voodoo's storyline because it just seems to be up in the air by the end of it. The Beale storyline I thought was very sweet and interesting, but he felt very wishy-washy throughout the whole novel and never felt like Brom had nailed his character development. Shieldeth was very static, I would say. And then Eduardo and Richard, I feel like we only needed one. I feel like they both kind of served a similar purpose, and both could have gotten Ruby to the same conclusion that the climax takes us to, but we didn't need both of them. And I found Richard to be overkill, and I found overkill, pun very much intended, and I found Eduardo to be very annoying. And again, I don't think Brom knew what he wanted to do with that character, so I also found that character very frustrating to read because he feels very different from the first half of the novel compared to his depiction in the second half of the novel. The same can be said with Ruby. Her initial character development felt very laid out, and I felt like we had the groundwork for who she was. And then with the second half, when we get the backstory of her relationship with her parents, I felt like it was really adding a lot more that wasn't alluded to at all in the first half of the novel, and therefore made the book a little bit more difficult to digest because it was adding so much about all of these characters at the end when it wasn't necessarily needed. Tina felt like almost too good to be true. Like, Tina was just like the perfect best friend. And I wanted her to have more depth and more flaws, which she did not. Again, same with Ruby. Ruby is definitely a flawed character, but her flaws don't run that deep. So she just kind of seems like somebody who is constantly in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that just becomes her personality. And I didn't love that either. Another thing, I am so sorry I'm hating on this so heavily. I enjoyed this book. I do promise that I didn't hate it. I read it very quickly. It was definitely one of the most compelling books I've read from Brom, as much as that means anything. The lyrics to the songs. I had this issue with Grady Hendrix' metal novel, We Sold Our Souls, which is a similar concept, where like you have to play metal music to break the evil curse or whatnot. But I had the same problem with that. Sometimes authors shouldn't write song lyrics. And Brom's lyrics I found so cheesy, and just not inspired at all. And I kept like imagining, what does this sound like? What does this sound like? What does this sound like? And lucky for me, Brom actually worked with this band down in Savannah called the Maxines, and they recorded 3 songs pretending to be our main character's band, the Nightmare. So you actually do get to hear what these songs sound like. I will say the songs sound better as songs than they do being read lyrically on a piece of paper, but the chorus is still really cheesy and really cringy in my opinion, even though they try very hard to make it sound very edgy and cool. And so it makes it hard for me to buy into the fact that these lyrics are so catchy that like hundreds of people feel compelled to sing the song, which of course is the plot of this entire novel. So that was just a suspension of disbelief problem that I was having, where I just really couldn't get past the cheesiness of the whole setting up the band, writing the songs, and using it to rid the world of evil. Like, that's a cool concept. It's a concept that's been done before. It's very much in like the metal of the 80s, satanic panic kind of realm that Brom is creating for us, but it was so corny. It was corny. And he, like, just the concepts that are put in this novel that I've just never even heard associated with demons ever. Like, the wiggling worms and the demon bowl. Like, there were a lot of things in here that I'm like, I think Brom made that up. I could be wrong, but I feel like Brom made it up and put it in the song because it kind of rhymed, but it just doesn't work. So, yeah. And then we get to the ending, which is, like, kind of brutal. Like, actually, it's, like, quite grotesque and brutal, and I felt like that kind of came out of nowhere for what the rest of the story was. So that was a little jarring for me, and, like, not to mention, like, very, very, very traumatic for a lot of the characters. And we don't even know what happened to some of the characters at the end. Like, it's up in the air, really, exactly what happens with, like, Tina, Mary, Pam, Billy, Stacy, Voodoo. Like, all of these characters that, like, felt very prominent. We don't really know what happened. We don't really know what happened to Ruby either. Like, it just kind of, like, ends. And then the fact that it ends with commentary from Richard, I found very strange. Because I felt like he's the last person who should be allowed to have the final say in the story. So that, to me, was weird. But yeah, no, I mean, if you want something, like, really, like, focused on, like, the 80s music alternative scene, this book will have all of that. Like, it's not a bad book. It just has a lot of flaws, and it felt very formulaic. But it really does kind of feel like just, like, this, like, kind of crazy 1980s metal music video. Like, there's so many things in here that are just, like, really scratch that itch of that kind of, like, 80s nostalgia. And so for that, I think this is a fun read. I just don't really see anything that I would find groundbreaking in comparison to Brom's other novels. If you like Brom's books, you will probably enjoy this. Like, again, I don't want to discourage anybody from reading it. I had a fine time reading it. I don't hate this book by any means. It just was okay for me. Yeah. I don't know. I think Beale was my favorite character. I really liked being inside Beale's head and getting his, like, inner thoughts, and how this poor dude is just like, I just want to, like, hang out with the birds and fly. Like, me too sometimes, Beale. Me too. But yeah, no, this was fine. I'm happy I read it. I will probably still continue to pick up Brom's books, because I do love reading the visuals that he creates and then seeing them on paper, and I love how his descriptions of the demons are always so beautiful and well done, and then when you see them translated on the page, it just makes so much sense. So I do think he has a really, really good descriptive capability, but I do think his character development and story formulation definitely still needs work. So I'm sorry, Brom. I am. Again, this book is beautiful. It was fun. It was definitely fun. If you liked We Sold Our Souls Too by Grady Hendrix, definitely check this one out, because it's a very, very, very similar vibe. Definitely not quite as humorous, but definitely fun. Yeah, and that is all that I have for you guys today. As always, I try to post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays. And if you enjoyed these videos, please hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and I will catch you on the next one. Mwah.